President Trump recently pardoned Dinesh D'Souza, prompting outrage from the left and the fake news media, which is also the left. For those who don't know, Dinesh D'Souza is a conservative documentary filmmaker. He was targeted by the Obama administration. Before I get to that, let me say, I think that Dinesh is a lot like me, in that he's a grateful immigrant who came to the United States from a lesser country, and because of that, he recognizes the unique virtues and freedoms that we have in America that so many Americans take for granted. That so many Americans just assume that those freedoms are everywhere, and they're not. Now, as I said, the left just went crazy over this particular pardon. The New York Times reported that he, being Trump, is using them as a weapon, and Bill Maher said that Trump is using pardons as a partisan tool to undermine our democracy. So yeah, Trump derangement syndrome is going crazy. Now, it is a valid question, because Trump's pardons so far really have been conservative. Is he being hyper-partisan? I think the answer to that is both yes and no. Because yes, they have been, conservative so far. But there's a reason for that. And that's because we just came out of an administration that targets conservatives. And so what I think President Trump is trying to do is reset the balance on the scales of justice, if you will. He's trying to set back what should never happen in the first place. And Dinesh's case is a great example of this. You see, Dinesh, he was charged and imprisoned, essentially, for campaign contributions that went over the limit. That's something that people are usually fined for as opposed to imprisoned, if anything at all. Sometimes you're just given a refund. But he was prosecuted and imprisoned. This was a result of the fact that first he put out the documentary Obama's America, criticizing obviously the Obama administration, and then he was targeted. When he came out, he produced the documentary Hillary's America, which, who knows, maybe that was one of the reasons that we never had a Hillary Clinton presidency. If that's the case, then we owe Dinesh a lot. If you want to hear an argument in favor of Dinesh and his charge, you can look at all of the people on the left who are trying to defend Rosie ODonnell. You see, she, apparently, did the same thing on 5 separate occasions, gave those campaign contributions in too high amounts, and she did it whilst using fake names, or should I say, variations of her name, just by chance. She hasn't been charged, she hasn't been fined. Those on the left who are defending her talk about how nobody's ever charged for that. It just doesn't happen. People might be fined every once in a while, but that's all. All the apologists for Rosie ODonnell are using the arguments that were made in favour of Dinesh, but which weren't listened to in the case of Dinesh, because he was targeted by the Obama administration. And that particular administration made a habit of targeting conservatives. Just look at the case in which the IRS, during Obama's years, targeted Tea Party groups, denying them 501c3, otherwise known as charity status. Or they went after groups that had terms like freedom in their names. Seriously, that actually happened. And targeted them for auditing and a kind of financial terrorism, in a sense. See, there are so many regulations when it comes to taxes. This is something that conservatives have been talking about for a while, that it's not really possible to do everything right. If the government wants to target you, if the IRS wants to target you, they can get you on something somewhere. And that's a problem. It should never be like that. But I also have a problem with the fact that that's the way our laws are now. We have so many laws and so many regulations that nobody can keep track of them. They can't, even if they spent their entire time, their entire lives looking at United States law, they wouldn't know them all. Even lawyers, they have specialties for this very reason. You can't know them all. And yet you're expected to. Not knowing them is not a defense. Now, there are lots of people who are imprisoned for things that most of us wouldn't even consider crimes, don't believe to be crimes. In fact, there's a book called 3 Felonies a Day. It's named that because that's how many felonies the average American commits every day without ever realizing it, without ever knowing that he's breaking the law. And there are lots of laws like this. One law that a lot of people, break from time to time is, have you ever called in sick when you weren't actually sick? Just about every working adult has at one point or another, right? And they just have a reason why you just can't go in that day. It happens. But that's a felony. It could be called a felony. It could be called a scheme to defraud your company of their intangible right to your honest services. Seriously, it seems kind of extreme, right? But it's there. It could be read that way. And there are multiple cases of injustices. I think that if President Trump can be criticized for anything when it comes to pardons, it's not pardoning enough people. He could pardon more people than any president in US history, and still never release anybody who has committed a crime that you and I would be aware of. A crime that none of those people would be considered criminals in the eyes of normal people. None of them would have committed violent offenses or hurt somebody in one way or another. I think that's a serious problem. And I'm glad that he's working to fix it. Pardons is something that most presidents do in their second term because they're kind of afraid of any sort of backlash. President Trump has never been afraid of backlash. Take the case of Brett McDaniel. This is a guy who was charged with a hacking offense. And most people think that hacking should be illegal. But he didn't actually hack anything. See, he worked at a company and he became aware of a security problem. After he left the company, he sent out emails notifying customers of that company of that exploit. How is that hacking? Well, the Justice Department said that he'd damaged their infrastructure. They interpreted damage to mean damaged the reputation of. He has 16 months imprisonment. That's no small amount of time. And the Justice Department did eventually, on appeal, say that they made a mistake by prosecuting. That was only after he'd actually done the time. It was too late. And there are thousands of cases just like this one. Now, the left, back before they were talking about, Russia constantly, they used to talk about some actual issues. And one of those, sometimes, was sentencing reform. About not putting so many people behind bars. And it's a topic worthy of discussion. Nowadays, they don't actually have any topics by which they can stand, any topics of virtue or value. So now, we have to do it. But there is a problem when there are so many laws that nobody can possibly keep track of them all. They're not just laws that enforce decency, that enforce right from wrong, right? President Trump has said that he's considering commuting the case of a guy named Rod Blagojevich. That's a guy who was accused of corruption. He was accused of essentially selling the Senate seat whilst he was governor. A lot of people at that time didn't think that he was given a fair trial, that he wasn't able to speak in his own defense and say everything that he wanted to. Okay? That guy's a Democrat. So you can see these multiple cases in which he's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to help where the Justice Department has been overzealous, has been wrong. And I find it kind of shocking that this is something that the left takes issue with. Because it's ironic that the left used to talk about these sentencing reform, but also wanted to increase regulations at the same time, but they've never really been known for their intellectual consistency. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe here on YouTube and hit the bell if you do. I've also got other ways in which you can be notified of new videos more reliably in the description below. If you'd also like to support me in the effort to keep producing these videos, there's information about that in the description below too. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Health-wise.